Ladies and gentlemen, both NATO and the European Union have both just completely and totally capitulated to every single one of President Trump's negotiation demands, and no, I'm not joking. You see, as many of you know, for decades now, the United States has been single-handedly bankrolling Europe's defense, while their so-called leaders have been laughing all the way to the bank, exploiting our generosity. But folks, President Trump just put an end to that nonsense, and I'll tell you what, right now, the globalists are absolutely losing their minds. For generations now, the United States has been stuck footing a whopping 2/3 of NATO's entire defense budget, even though there are 32 member countries in NATO who are supposed to help share that load. The truth is, because our American economy is so massive, and because we have always generously shelled out way more than our agreed upon 2% of our GDP, hovering always closer to around 3.5%, we have been effectively subsidizing Europe's safety while they skip out on their promises. But check this out. President Trump just went over to Europe and attended this NATO summit to tell them that the free ride is over, demanding that they ramp up their defense spending to 5% of their GDP, and guess what? They actually listened. In fact, I want you all to take a look at what President Trump himself had to say about all of this. Let it play.
I briefed leaders on the current state of play in our trade talks with the United States. President Trump and I had a good discussion at the G7 summit in Canada. Back then, we agreed to speed up the work with a clear goal, an agreement before the 9th of July. Today, we received the latest US document for further negotiations. We are assessing it as we speak right now. So our message today is clear. We are ready for a deal.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. President Trump flew all the way over to Europe to lay down the law, and now the European NATO leaders are bending over backwards to meet every single one of his demands. And I'll tell you what, here's the reality. President Trump has just exposed decades of Europe's shameful reliance on American defense spending, ending an era of unbalanced burden sharing that has been ripping off American taxpayers for far too long. But you know what? Just wait, it gets even better. Not only did President Trump get NATO to commit to 5% of GDP without promising a single extra dime from America, but he also strong-armed the European Union into dropping tariffs on American-made products. And as if that wasn't enough, the European Union also caved to President Trump's demand to cut back on imports from China, putting further pressure on the CCP, which is one of President Trump's top priorities. And so, folks, I want you all to take a listen to what EU President Ursula von der Leyen had to say about all of this, but first, I do want to say real quick that if you guys enjoy the daily news updates, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. But okay, check this out.
Major focus of our conversations at the summit was the need for other NATO members to take up the burden of the defense of Europe, and that included the financial burden. As you know, it was 2%, and we got it up to 5%. And they said, a couple of them came up to me, one in particular said, "Sir, we've been trying to get it up to 3% for 20 years, and we haven't been able, and you got it up to 5%. So they're going to be, most of them, I guess almost all of them, are going to be contributing now 5%, a number that people are surprised at, but you need it today. The United States accounts for 2/3 of all NATO defense spending. And since I began pushing for additional commitments in 2017, believe it or not, our allies have increased spending by $700 billion. I said to people, you don't have any money, and a lot of them weren't paying. And so I started the process, and I picked it up as soon as I got back, which is 6 months ago. And following my election last November, almost all have accelerated plans to reach the 2%, 3%, 4%, and then ultimately, very quickly, 5%. And all of this is going to be done very quickly, almost immediately. You probably know this as well as I do. I'm sure they've been talking about it. It's really been a big focus. In a very historic milestone this week, the NATO allies committed to dramatically increase their defense spending to that 5% of GDP, something that no one really thought possible. And they said, "You did it, sir, you did it." Well, I don't know if I did it, but I think I did. This will be known as the Hague Defense Commitment, which is pretty good, pretty appropriate.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Right now, the European Union as well as NATO are both practically begging to keep President Trump happy, and you know why? It's because they've realized that without American support and economic trade, they're pretty much screwed. Now, I do have to say, if you remember all the way back to 2017, these very same European leaders scoffed at President Trump's demands, acting like he was some type of joke, but right now, they are eating their words and absolutely scrambling to comply. Here's the honest truth. President Trump's negotiations have forced Europe to stop exploiting our generosity, creating a stronger, self-reliant alliance that finally puts American interests first. And so you know what? This is not just a massive win for President Trump, no. This is also a massive win for every single hardworking American taxpayer who is tired of seeing our tax dollars funneled to prop up Europe's defense while they have been cozying up to China. For decades now, all of these international globalist elites have been riding on our coattails, letting us pay for their security while they push anti-American policies, but President Trump just shut that down hard. And let's be very clear, the only reason Europe is falling in line now is because they have finally realized that without America's economic strength and security, their entire alliance would collapse like a house of cards. As you all know, President Trump's America First agenda is about putting our American workers, our American manufacturers, and our American national security first, and all of these deals further prove that he is delivering on those promises. In fact, a major part of this is that all of our NATO allies have actually agreed to buy more American-made military hardware, which means thousands of new jobs for American workers here in America, further boosting Trump's economic recovery. And so, folks, when you stop and really think about it, this is what real American leadership actually looks like. President Trump flew over to Europe, stared down all of the globalists, and made them bend the knee to America first. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know about all of you, but hey, in my humble opinion, this is what it looks like to actually make America great again. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we wrap up, I do want to say real quick that we officially have a Morse News Twitter page as well as a Morse News Facebook page. So if you use either of those platforms, please go down below and drop a follow in order to get breaking news updates that relate to everything we talk about here in the YouTube videos. But everyone, that is going to be a wrap for today's video, so please go down below and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this. Please like the video while you're down there, and like I said earlier, please consider subscribing to the channel because it really does help a ton. Thank you all very much for tuning in today, and of course, as always, stay safe.